Welcome back. Now, most of us can find it difficult to deal with criticism, be it at home or in work, although we never get any in work, and of course. Today, we are looking at how you can build up the skills to deal with criticism in a more effective way.
Yes, and psychologist Alison Keating joins us now with some tips. No better woman. Good morning, Alison.
Good morning, how are you?
No one likes to be criticised, Alison, but it can be important and helpful. So when does it go from being important and helpful and maybe constructive to just damaging and maybe pure mean?
Yeah. I think you have to ask yourself one question. What was the person's intent? And it's just the one question you have to keep in your mind, and it clarifies everything immediately. Sometimes people are just being critical for the point of just feeling superior or better, or there's nothing actually constructive in it, and sometimes they're actually just being mean. So that you have to ask yourself the question, what was the person's intent here? Were they trying to actually help me with something? Or were they just, one of the hints is that if it's about your things you can't change, like, when it's personal, really personal, what good criticism will focus on the behaviour. It'll focus on what you're actually doing that you can actually change. So it's like, what was their intent? Were they actually attacking me as a person, or were they looking at some things that I'm doing that I could actually improve
So maybe more behaviours or your approach to something.
Absolutely, yeah.
In terms of, your instinctive reaction to being criticised, okay, even if it is constructive, there can still be a temptation to lash back.
Absolutely.
Because your hackles are raised, and it's fine to say, well, if it's not personal, that's constructive criticism. But it's an instinctive reaction to get your hackles up and to be offended. Now, so how do you deal with that and process that correctly?
Totally. I mean, it's about putting theory into practice. This all sounds wonderful on paper.
Yes.
But when you get criticised, it's like being stung by a bee. It feels like an attack, and those words, they just stay in your mind. And why did they say that? What did she mean by that? And the problem is, if it's hit a sore spot, your own insecurities can go into it as well. So be really careful with criticism, that you're actually hearing what the person's actually said, because often our perception, and if it's hit off something that we realise, God, I do actually do that. That you then can spiral all your other insecurities onto it. So for someone who has low self-esteem, criticism can be, it can feel completely overwhelming, actually. So it's just being aware that you're not adding your own insecurities onto it as well, and you're hearing what actually has been said.
Yeah, we are quite a critical nation, aren't we?
We are.
Nation of begrudgers, as they say.
Yeah, they do. And I think we are quite critical of ourselves as well, Alison.
I think the worst critic, most definitely, is ourselves. And, when clients say things to me, I say to them, would you say that to anybody else?
Yeah.
Like, if you actually listen to yourself, it's a really good idea to keep a diary for a week and write down every time you criticise. You'd actually be like, oh, my God, I'm so horrible to myself. So it's learning how to actually stop doing that, because it robs you of energy. When you're sitting down, and we all make mistakes. I think we have to kind of recognise that none of us are perfect, and with our flaws we have to kind of go, right, someone's pointed this out. What am I actually going to do with it? And sit with it. When you're saying, like, when people are reactive, it's so easy to just jump back and defend yourself. Just sit with it for a second, which people don't like. To sit with something that's kind of uncomfortable and say, okay, there is some truth in that. Can I actually do anything about this? So
this is the kernel of where we're at with this item today, is how can you get the positive from criticism? So whether it's a work situation or relationship situation where, you've dealt with, you figured out it's not a personal attack on you, but how can you actually say, well, you know what, it's stuff I can work on here? Yeah.
You sit with it. And I think that's where, as a society, we're becoming... Everything is so reactive now, and even if you think about criticism, like, say, at an online level, I think people are just so quick at doling out the criticism that you have to sit with it for a second and go, okay, hang on a second, what can I do about this? And even maybe write out the situation as it actually happened, and kind of pull out the truth, and then make a bit of a plan on what you can actually do about it. But sometimes, like, this can be quite a painful process. It's easier to be reactive. It's easier to hit back and say, well, you did this as well. And it's really interesting to think about it, as you say, in your relationships or at work. if you have to continue a relationship with this person, if you get into a bit of a loop where one person criticizes, you criticize back, and it just goes on and on, just ask yourself, how can I actually change this dynamic? Because some people can have quite critical relationships with certain people.
Yeah. Don't they often say, Alison, someone gave me this advice before and I thought it was very good advice. You know, if you're replying to an email and you're angry about something, or you're replying to a tweet or anything, I suppose, in your life, type it or whatever, put it down and then save it as a draft. And then maybe go for coffee, take a deep breath, read over it again when you're maybe less angry.
Yeah.
And you've had time, as you say, to let it sink in.
I would love everybody to realise that we have a pause button.
Yeah.
And I think everything in life has become faster. And the ability to press that button is so quick and easy, and especially when you're like, how dare
because
they
when
say
you
that?
read over the words an hour later or the next day, you may have cooled off a little bit.
Yeah.
You may soften the tone of it.
You will, definitely. I mean, your brain needs that 20-minute break. Even if you gave yourself, I like the idea of the night, but if you even gave yourself 20 minutes, just calm down. And then think about that person having that email or that tweet.
Yeah.
It's there.
And it's gone.
It's
Once
gone.
it's gone, you can't
You
get it
can't
back.
get it back.
Yeah.
So I suppose just take a deep breath, you know, and kind of like basically lick your wounds a bit and be like, okay, well, I feel really upset by this. But ask yourself, why do I feel upset by this? What is it bringing up for me? Is this something that's been there for a long time? And rather than actually getting down into that kind of negative spiral and putting all of your insecurities in and you being your own worst inner critic, because it's really bad when someone else has highlighted something that you
Already think.
and then go, look, I can do something about this.
Yeah.
And if you can't do something about it, then it's just reframing it in your mind to accept yourself as you are, because sometimes there's things that we can't actually change. It's not a magic wand situation, but we can take ownership of how we react to other people, but I think it's most important to how we react to ourselves.
Just quickly, and we're running out of time here, in terms of giving criticism as well. So if you're on the other side and you're, as I say, whether it's a work or a relationship situation or any situation, and you want to point something out,
Yes.
how do you do it?
You know the analogy of a sandwich, certain type of sandwich.
I know that analogy.
Yeah, so I mean, you layer the sandwich, you put the positive on top, you give the message of what you actually would like to change in the middle, and then you end it on a positive note. Now, that is not just for the sake of being false or, you know, ingenuine at all. But the truth is, if you just go straight in with criticism, people will resist. People feel like they're telling you what to do, and people hate that.
So let's say Tommy wants to criticise his wife at home for not doing something that week. How would you deliver that? Let's say he felt he did more housework than she did, and he wants to say that in the correct way, in the most constructive way.
The most constructive thing to do with that is to watch your tone.
Okay.
Because you can deliver any message if you change your tone.
Yeah. Don't know about that one though.
Well, it makes an enormous difference. But it just recognising that if you go in straight with criticism and say, what, you didn't do this and I did everything this week, the person's going to feel like you're not valuing them. So you have to start with what you value. So what not I know your wife, but what you value that she did actually do this week, then look
She
at...
does a lot, Alison, okay?
Absolutely,
This is the most unlikely scenario that we're throwing up here,
Trust me.
obviously.
No, but I completely understand that you're just, when you're giving criticism, rather than just going straight in with the criticism, you go in and you want the person not to resist against you, but to kind of give it in a way that the person actually wants to cooperate.
A bit of diplomacy, darling.
Yes.
That's the way I'll do it, Anna. Okay?
It's not the first time you've heard those words, is it?
It's usually going the other way. It's usually going the other way. I can
Thank you
tell
very
that.
much,
Alison,
Alison.
thank you very much for that. Quick break now. Thanks.